Good morning. Indeed, I'm going to present two strategies to you. Like Iwan was explaining already, we do manage several funds, several type of portfolios, almost 20 billion, 18 billion, I have to be honest, of assets altogether. But I chose two funds to present here simply because they do exist in a Czech Corona version, MA5, Patrimonial Multi-Asset 5, and Patrimonial Aggressive, two completely different funds, but we'll dig into that later.
Pánové mají pod palcem 18 miliard, několik fondů nebo několik portfoliových strategií. Vybrali pro vás tyto dvě zejména proto, že jsou dostupné v korunách.
I want to start indeed by summarizing again the key characteristics of the fund, really the things you have to keep in mind when you're selling these products to clients. First of all, indeed, it's a flexible multi-asset product with a total return mindset. And indeed, so the product can invest in 6 asset classes, ranging from equities, fixed income, real estate, commodities, currencies, and cash, but in a very flexible way. So we'll only invest in these asset classes when we think that those asset classes will perform well and will print positive returns.
Takže určité zopakování toho, co už bylo řečeno, jde o fondy, které investují do mnoha tříd aktiv, dluhopisy, akcie, nemovitosti a tak dále. Podstatné je, že jde o flexibilní přístup k investicím, to znamená, zainvestují do nich pouze v případě, že očekávají, že ponesou zisk.
So a total return objective, meaning indeed we clearly aim for the highest possible return, and indeed we have a target return, cash plus 2% on an annual basis. But indeed also very important, as Iwan mentioned already, is in fact the steady character of the fund. We really want to avoid big drawdowns of the fund, a really stable upward path, let's say, we want to see in the NAV, in the price of the fund, let's say.
Cílem je zabránit adrenalinu nebo zabránit nějakým dramatickým výkyvům, to znamená cílovat postupný a pomalý růst, jak už bylo zmíněno, 2% jsou tím, co by vám fond měl dát.
And although it's a multi-asset fund, in fact it's a really very defensive fund that comes from the maximum risk level. We have a clear risk budget, a promise we make to clients that the maximum VAR we're going to use, indeed the value at risk, is not higher than 5. And indeed that means that in normal market environments it has a 55% chance that the fund wouldn't lose more than 5% over a 12-month rolling period. That's in fact the VAR concept, what it means.
Jak bylo zmíněno, to riziko, že byste přišli více než 5%, je nízké, 5%, na druhou stranu 59.
59. Oh, okay. So it's almost sure that it will not lose more than 5%.
Right. Okay. 95% pravděpodobnost, že nestratíte víc než 5%.
And maybe I have to clarify what that means, because VAR 5, it's a figure you give. But to what can you compare it? In fact, if you compare this, for instance, with a fixed income fund, the last 3 years, a Euro Treasury fund, so normal a government bond fund, has a volatility which is in fact higher than VAR 5. If you would recalculate that in a VAR measure, you come out with a VAR of around 7.5% for a normal treasury fund. So in fact you can say that the multi-asset 5 fund has less risk, is less risky than a traditional bond fund, and in that sense it's really suitable for very conservative investors.
Pro srovnání dluhopisové fondy, které jsou obecně považovány za velmi stabilní a konzervativní, tak měli v poslední době mnohem vyšší riziko toho, že přijdete o stejné procento nebo vyšší procento jako v tomto případě, než tady v tomto případě fondu ING.
And of course that means then that we have clear limits. We cannot invest 100% in equities. We cannot even invest full of the risk, let's say, in a fixed income, simply because that risk limit doesn't allow us to do that, as that's the clear starting point of the product, let's say.
Což mimo jiné znamená, že samozřejmě nelze volit jisté rizikové strategie, jako například zainvestovat příliš nebo vše do akcí nebo dluhopisů nebo jednoho nebo několika rizikových aktiv.
And a last characteristic to highlight maybe is that indeed this fund, it's a fund of funds, so we usually invest in other funds, as well passive as active funds, but we can also invest in open architecture funds, meaning in third-party funds, funds of other providers as ING. And we do that selection together with Altis, that's another company of ING Group. It's really well known in the market for screening and selecting other asset managers, and we're having regular meetings with them to see which funds they really like and that can be included in our patrimonial MA5 fund if we think that's appropriate.
Vedle jednotlivých aktiv fond nebo pánové také investují do fondů nebo třetích stran, řekněme. K tomu dochází po konzultaci se společností Altis nebo s institucí Altis, která je součástí také i ING skupiny, se kterou pravidelně tyto možnosti nebo tuto možnost konzultují.
I want to say a little bit more about the process. I know that Ivan highlighted already the big steps, let's say, so now I'm going to explain a little bit more into depth what that means for MA5. The first step in the neutral phase, the starting point, let's say, as I mentioned already, the product MA5 doesn't have a benchmark, so we cannot align to a benchmark as a starting point. But what we're going to do is that in fact we target normally for a neutral position, for a position where we don't have tactical views, to target, let's say, 2/3 of the maximum risk budget. So in fact, the neutral portfolio targets a VAR budget of 3.2 as a starting point.
Začíná se tedy tím, že až 2/3 toho portfolia se vytvářejí s jakýmsi neutrálním pohledem na věc. Then
2/3 as a starting point will balance that 2 points, in fact, in 50% really safe assets, really meaning by safe assets high quality treasuries, cash, and the other half of that risk budget will be filled with risky assets, meaning equities, commodities, real estate, and so on.
Portfolio se rozdělí na riziková, neriziková, mezi riziková samozřejmě patří akcie a podobná aktiva, mezi neriziková nebo méně riziková, dluhopisy a tak dále.
And then of course we move on to the next step, the tactical phase. Of course we're gonna deviate then from that neutral position. We're gonna add more equities if we think that equities is really our favorite asset classes at that moment, and then automatically your VAR budget will increase a little bit. If we move more to risky assets, the VAR will increase. Other way around, if we really don't like an asset class, we can decide simply not to invest in that asset class, as we do not have to follow a benchmark, and we definitely aiming for positive total returns.
Pak přijde na řadu ten taktický pohled nebo taktický krok a v rámci tohoto kroku se pánové mohou rozhodnout například zainvestovat mnohem víc do akcí v případě, že věří tomu, že akcím se bude dařit. Na druhou stranu, jelikož nesledují žádný benchmark, nemají žádná pevně daná pravidla, abych tak řekl, tak v případě, že akcím nevěří, tak do akcí nebo do jakéhokoliv jiného aktiva prostě neinvestují.
In that sense, many investors that I speak to are now a little bit afraid, especially the defensive defensive clients, which we're targeting a bit with this product, are asking me and are really afraid of rising bond yields, for instance. They know yields are very low, but might rise in the coming weeks and months. Of course, this product clearly gives an answer, let's say, if you're really afraid or really believe that bonds really will start to rise very, very quickly. We can, for instance, move completely out of fixed income or reduce duration really, in fact, to zero if we want to, and move back all the safe assets, let's say, to cash if that's really necessary.
Příkladem mohou být současné obavy některých investorů, že by výnosy z dluhopisů mohly začít růst velmi rychle. Pokud takové obavy existují, je možné buď odtražují se od dluhopisů, v podstatě úplně odejít, nebo ten investiční horizont nastavit jako velmi krátký, tím pádem minimalizovat to riziko.
Then we move on to the third phase. Indeed, we have to select then, let's say, instruments to implement really the views and to really have exposure to markets. So like I said already, we use funds. We combine as well passive funds with active funds. So passive funds meaning really only tracking an index, where active funds really having active bets and trying to outperform benchmarks.
Pak je samozřejmě sázka na fondy nebo investice prostřednictvím fondů dalších, to mohou být buď aktivní nebo pasivní. Ty pasivní, ty víceméně sledují jednotlivé indexy tržní, ty aktivní ty se snaží ty indexy přebít nebo mít vyšší výnosnost.
And within these active funds, indeed, we can choose between ING funds and third-party funds. Third-party funds will always be a little bit more expensive for the fund to do that. But it can be, if we really believe that those third-party asset managers have enough added value to repay, let's say, that extra fee, that extra cost, we will definitely choose an active third-party fund. If not, we go for an ING fund that we really like for a tracker, or maybe also for futures, but that's most of the time for efficiency reasons, to quickly steer the portfolio in a certain direction. That's more cost efficient.
Ty fondy mohou být buď ze skupiny ING nebo vně skupiny ING, nebo fondy, které jsou vně skupiny ING, samozřejmě ty, které jsou vně, tak jsou o něco dražší, nicméně v případě, že pánové věří tomu, že jejich výnosnost je dostatečně zajímavá, tak samozřejmě má smysl do nich investovat, má také smysl do nich investovat v případě, že se jedná o fondy, které investují do konkrétních zajímavých věcí nebo zajímavé strategie.
And then in the last phase, of course, we have risk management. We have our own risk tool measuring the VAR and seeing that we're not exceeding the budget at all and keep clearly below the limit we have there. But also externally, the risk department of ING IM in The Hague is really looking carefully to the position. If we stick to all the rules we have to follow, all usage rules, all things we promise to clients in mandates, that we are definitely not exceeding or taking more risk than necessary.
A nedílnou součástí tohoto procesu je samozřejmě také evaluace nebo hodnocení rizika, jak interní proces, který dohlíží na to, existuje tedy, který dohlíží na to, aby to riziko nebylo příliš vysoké, tak v rámci skupiny je vnější, řekl bych, kontrolor, který na to dohlíží.
Then looking at performance of the fund, and I know probably most of you know this fund already for a while and probably saw immediately after the launch a big drop, because in fact the fund was launched in April 2010 in a very difficult market context where really the euro crisis was starting overall again and was really challenging financial markets.
Fond, o kterém teď mluvíme, byl představen v dubnu roku 2010, tedy v době, kdy evropská hospodářská krize nabírala na obrátkách opět, a tím pádem samozřejmě začínal ve velmi obtížném prostředí nebo v obtížné situaci.
But in fact, at that period, it wasn't our team that was managing the portfolio. In fact, it was Peter Mattis, maybe some of you ever met him, a guy of another team that was managing the fund. Immediately after the launch, let's say, he decided indeed that probably it was better for him to leave the company. He left indeed, and since that time, let's say since the summer of 2010, it was in fact our team that took over responsibilities of the fund. And indeed, since that time, you clearly see that in fact the graph is showing what we are promising them to do. It steadily moves up without big volatility, gradually increasing in fact since our team, the multi-asset team, where we described a bit the process and so on, is taking over management of the fund.
Za ten první poměrně dramatický propad pánové nemůžou. Přebrali fond v létě roku 2010. To na grafu, který máte před sebou, je ten okamžik, kdy se začínají věci zvedat, a od té doby v podstatě ten graf samotný hovoří za vše nebo potvrzuje, o čem zde už byla řeč. To znamená, cílem je jakýsi pomalý, ale jistý růst bez dramatických výkyvů.
Important for you to know is also that the old investment process, which caused maybe the drop, isn't used anymore. The process like we described is our process. Before it was a truly, at the starting period, a full quant process, really trusting fully 100% computer models and simply following the signals of them. Like Ivan explained already to you, we never do that. We have computer models helping us, but in fact we also can qualitatively, or if we really think it's better not to follow the models, we can deviate from models. That's one thing we changed. On the other hand, we're focusing more on downside risk protection than the old model. So in that sense, we're confident that the trend will be a much less volatile path going forward. And we're confident that we can continue, let's say, to keep a gradual moving line upwards.
Ten rozdíl mezi strategií předchozího týmu a toho současného týmu, týmu, který je zastoupen pány, kteří jsou dnes s vámi zde, je v tom, že předchozí tým používal počítače a počítačem generované rady nebo strategie. Pánové používají samozřejmě data a analýzy dat, počítačem generovaná, ale zároveň, jak už zde bylo zmíněno, vycházejí z nějakých analýz kvalitativních, vychází z toho, ze svých zkušeností a z nějakého čtení situace na trhu, očekávané situace na trhu. Zároveň se snaží do značné míry minimalizovat riziko, o čem zde také už byla řeč.
Maybe short comment on recent performance here, because indeed here the line is moving up nicely. Then here in June we got a big correction, and since then we're moving a bit gradually sideways. What happened there? In fact, in June it was the first time that Ben Bernanke, the head of the Fed in the United States, started to talk about tapering his QE program, to reducing, let's say, his bond buying program. And then markets had really a rough time. In fact, all asset classes dropped at the same time. As well, bonds, where yields started to rise very quickly, but also real estate, equities, commodities. In fact, there was no place to hide at that period. So, of course, then our product, as we were invested in most of these asset classes at that time, really felt it, and we couldn't hide anywhere. But since then, we're recovering gradually in the last days and weeks.
Ještě drobné vysvětlení toho, proč po tom poměrně dlouhém a stabilním růstu došlo k propadu, což je léto roku 2013, pravý horní roh grafu, který máte před sebou. To je doba, kdy Ben Bernanke, šéf amerického Fedu centrální banky, začal mluvit o možném exitu nebo utažení měnové politiky. V tu chvíli v podstatě většina aktivit, většina trhů začala padat a tím pádem se nebylo, jak se říká, kam schovat, neboli i tento fond, který doplatil na obecný propad většiny trhů.
So in fact, our team is managing the fund now for a little bit longer than 3 years. In fact, at the end of July, it was truly 3 years. Here on the slides, on the slide there, I show in fact the full period. What I'm talking about is in fact 3 years and 1 month. A difficult month of August I added. If you look at the full period, you can say that definitely gross returns over the slightly more than 3 years are quite in line with the target return we have. On the other side, net, meaning after fees indeed, we're lagging a little bit the target, but still have a positive return there.
Za ty 3 roky a 1 měsíc, kdy pánové fond vedli, jak vidíte v tabulce pravá strana, poslední sloupec, tak ten cílovaný stav, nebo cílovaný výnos, což je spodní řádek tabulky, a skutečný výnos se od sebe příliš neliší. Co se týče čistého výnosu, tedy očištění od poplatku a tak dále, tam je to trošku větší, ten rozdíl, nicméně stále jsou v pozitivním teritoriu, to znamená nabízejí zisk nebo nabídli zisk.
One more comment to make maybe indeed is this period, which is quite remarkable. That was really the start when we took over the fund. That's truly a period when yields really started to rise, bond yields. German bonds, 10-year bond, rose in that period between 2.1 to 2.9, so really a yield shock. And still, like I said, the product managed to steer away out of bonds into other asset classes and managed then to print returns, positive returns. Even the net was quite in line with the target we have there at that period. Really proving that this product can be a solution for conservative fixed income investors by simply diversifying more with a similar kind of risk budget.
To, o čem teď mluví, je víceméně příklad toho, jak lze v případě aktivního přístupu některá rizika minimalizovat nebo se jim vyhnout. Hovoříme o období srpna roku 2010 a prosince roku 2010, kdy výnosy z německých dluhopisů, pozdrav pánbu, výnosy z německých dluhopisů výrazně narostly z 2,1 na 2,9%, a přitom německé dluhopisy jsou tradiční, takzvaný bezpečný přístav, to znamená pro mnohé v době nejistoty byly volbou jasnou. Tím, že v rámci fondů se víceméně ty investice do německých dluhopisů v té době utlumily, tak se povedlo vyhnout se riziku stížkovaným neboli propadu stížkovaným, možná propadu stížkovaným.
And proving that performance is compared to peers quite well, I added a slide on peers. For peers, I quite often get questions, of course, what is a good peer? Many funds call themselves total return, but you always have to look at similar risk budgets. Like I said, the risk budget we have is really, really low, so that's already one thing. On the other hand, I only selected multi-asset funds, because for instance, total return funds that were only focusing on bonds in recent years performed maybe a little better, but that's normal. Bonds had the biggest bull market ever, let's say. So for us it's better to compare with real multi-asset funds, and that's what I did here on the slide.
Tohle je malé srovnání různých multi-asset fondů, tedy fondů s podobnou strategií, jaká je vám dnes představována.
And what I really like to show to you indeed here is indeed, so we are the orange line, of course, where in the end of 2011, January, many funds had problems and really saw negative returns there. We managed to remain quite stable there and really maintain the gradual upward slope, let's say, of the graph without too much volatility. So really proving and delivering what we promised, very low volatility, and in that sense investors can be sure that they sleep well at night because the portfolio will gradually move upwards, in fact.
ING Patrimonial je na tomto grafu oranžová, jak jinak barva ING. To, na co zde bylo upozorněno, je období konce roku 2011, respektive začátek roku 2012, kdy vidíte, že mnoho fondů se stejným přístupem k věci, nebo se stejným přístupem k investování začala ztrácet. ING Patrimonial se držela nadále v poměrně jasné vzrůstové tendenci nebo v jakémsi růstovém intervalu, což mimo jiné zejména zaručuje klidný spánek investorů.
How we're positioned currently? I show here a graph till the end of August, but orally I will give some extra comments on how we're positioned. We have a slight preference for risky assets, and in that sense we do have a preference for equities. We even added a little bit to equities. At the end of August we had 6%. Currently we're around 9% invested in equities.
Zde vidíte v tuto chvíli, jak má fond investováno, respektive v tuto chvíli do akcí, což je což jsou ty první aktiva nebo první třída v rámci grafu, který máte před sebou, tak je zainvestováno víc, jde zhruba o 9%.
We reduced a bit the real estate position. Indeed, in June, when you saw the negative return, maybe at that time the main cause was in fact the position in real estate. So we decided to reduce it a little bit. And on the other hand, here still I have a 0 for commodities. In fact, in recent weeks, we added, so in September really, we added a small position, a little bit more than 1% in commodities as well, broad commodities, because we do believe that the better Chinese economic data will support commodities going forward.
U nemovitostí se ta expozice nebo ta angažovanost mírně snížila, než tedy v porovnání s tím, co vidíte před sebou. A u alternativ, což v jejich případě nebo v případě, o kterém zde mluvíme, jsou komodity, tak se to z nuly mírně navýšilo, nepsází na to, že oživení v Číně nebo poslední vývoj v Číně by mohl nebo měl vést k růstu zájmu poptávky po komoditách.
In recent months, let's say since April, May, we clearly reduced the fixed income weight. Currently it's only 33%. Moved a little bit more to cash and money market, with short-term bonds, let's say there. That's in the cash bucket for one part. Furthermore, within fixed income, we don't have too many credit positions, meaning investment-grade corporate bonds, high-yielding corporate bonds and emerging market bonds, simply because we believe we prefer equities more and we think they're better valued equities than those credit bonds, I would say.
U fixed income došlo k mírnému poklesu z 33,7 na 33. Nejde ani tak o někdy populární dluhopisy rozvíjejících se trhů zemí a podobné rizikovější věci, jakož pánové věří, že v tuto chvíli je lepší a zajímavější nakupovat akcie. Co se hotovosti týče a peněžních trhů, tam také došlo k drobné změny.
And as a consequence, duration of the portfolio is really short. It's only 1.4 for the moment, and that means then all two positions together that we have a VAR. In August it was around 3, currently it's slightly higher because we added the commodities and equities in September, so now it's more around 3.4 we currently have.
Což znamená, že riziko bylo velmi nízké teď, po té, co se navýšily sázky na akcie, zmíněné navýšení sázek na akcie a na komodity, tak se mírně zvýšilo, ale stále je velmi nízké.
So to summarize for us, it's a multi-asset fund, MA5, very flexible, but the fact that it's multi-asset doesn't mean it's risky, not at all. In fact, it has a lower risk than a normal bond portfolio. It has the total return mindset, so aiming for positive returns. We will not invest in asset classes when we believe they will print negative returns. And in that sense, we hope to see the NAV move up gradually, and we hope to prevent major negative surprises by that VAR concept and risk limiting concept we have.
Jinými slovy, i když jde o strategii, v rámci které se sází na různá aktiva, tak to riziko není vyšší, naopak je nižší a to je také cílem této strategie nebo tohoto fondu v podstatě zajistit trvalý, nepříliš volatilní růst s co nejmenším rizikem, nebo to je to VAR, ten koncept, který je pravidelně zmiňován nebo